Have you ever wondered why you're able to tell what something is when all it really is just a bunch of shapes? How about why you're able to discern some things are part of a group and why some aren't? And if so, have you ever wondered how you can use this to tell something, for example with your comic? No? Well, you're about to be schooled about it all the same. Welcome to another exciting episode of Lemme School Ya. Today we will be covering the Gestalt theories. And before you get your hopes up, this doesn't mean we'll be talking about Nia in any positive way, cause that's about Gestalt psychology, which is completely different. So a little history lesson. Back in the 1920s, a group of psychologists from Germany developed a series of theories of virtual perception. These later became the basis rules of visual designs that we use today. We will mostly cover the actual theories and only cover briefly how you can use them in a comic, cause I want you guys to experiment with that stuff on your own. If I tell you exactly how to use them, there's a chance you'll think that that's the only way of using them, and I want to avoid that. If this all seems confusing, don't worry, it'll all make sense once we get into it. Number 1. Similarity. So look at the Statue of Liberty here. Well, first of all, how are we able to deduce that this is the Statue of Liberty and not about 40 different sized triangles? This is because of the Gestalt rule of similarities. When objects look similar to one another, viewers will often see the individual elements as part of a pattern or a group. This effect can be used to create a single illustration, image, or message from a series of separate elements. This similarity can be everything from a shape, to size, to color, to texture, basically anything that makes the different elements look similar. The reverse can also be applied, like when looking at the Beatles album here. It doesn't take a genius to see the outstanding picture on this cover, because every picture but one is similar. Basically, the rule of similarities puts everything in compartments, meaning you're more inclined to see all the elements within that compartment as one thing. That is why when you see this image here, you'll see the Statue of Liberty instead of a bunch of triangles. An example in terms of narratives can be Mirror's Edge, for example. In Mirror's Edge, everything is white, bright blue, and similar colors that are very bright. It all makes it look pristine, clean, to the point where it seems artificial and fake. And then you have Faith, who's clad in all black. This shows she does not conform to how the world is set up and doesn't follow the rules of the society. When you meet guards, they are typically clad in the same kind of color as the society they are protecting, showing they are agreeing and following the rules and are working to uphold them. Because Faith is clad in black, she stands out. She doesn't fit with the rest of the world. This is also why the red things that are supposed to lead you through the levels are so easy to spot, because they stand out. You might also remember this as something I talked a lot about in my case study of Randowizz's We Live in an MMO comic. If things are similar, you use it to create a connection. Even if it's a villain and a hero of a story, for example, if they are both training for the fight against one another, there's a connection, and even if they have completely different ideals and motivations, settings and people they hang out with, there's a connection when we see them both training. In short, similarities helps you connect some things, and the opposite means a disconnect. Number 2. Continuation. Continuation is the principle through which the eye is drawn along a path, line or curve, preferring to see a single continuous figure than separate lines. This can be used to point towards another element in the composition. So here you got the word space, and it looks like a star just flied through. Now obviously the star didn't move, it's printed, but we get a sense of movement. Why is that? Because of the rule of continuation. In this image, not only are you able to tell what letters are which, despite the top part of them are cut off, but you are also able to see a trajectory of the star, despite there's nothing there. But your brain is trained to fill out the blanks, and so it fills out both the hole in the letters, but also creates an invisible line behind the star. In short, continuation is continuing whatever lines are already there with your mind. This is something a lot of action comics actually use. If someone fires a gun, you'll typically see a line coming out of the barrel. And if the bullet hasn't hit anything yet, you can follow the trajectory of the bullet and continue that line with your brain to see if it'll hit or not. It's the same with, say, a good punch. If someone is in the middle of throwing a punch, you can tell where it's gonna end up. That's also a great way of showing power, for example. Because if it looks like the person isn't done doing the punch, like this picture here, it looks like they're really powering through. But if you can't tell them moving anymore beyond this point, like this picture here, it doesn't have the same impact. Number 3. Closure. Closure rests a lot up against continuation. Closure is a common design technique that uses the human eye's tendency to see closed shapes. Closure works when an object is incomplete or the interior space of an element is not fully closed, but the viewer perceives a complete shape by filling in the missing information. This technique is often associated with stenciled artwork, but is also closely associated with logo forms. There's not a whole lot to this one. As long as you've given the person enough information, you basically expect them to fill out the blanks. This is why this works better with well-known shapes such as the star here or the panda. In terms of how to use this for a comic, I'm honestly a little unsure. This is more commonly used for logos because you only have so much space to convey information on, so you typically use this way of conveying two sets of information at the same time. But who knows, maybe you can think of a use of it. Number 4. Proximity. If you look at this picture here, what boxes would you group together? Unlike with rule 1 of similarities, all of these blocks are the same size, same shape, and same color. So instead of using those things to group them together, we use proximity. This is not exactly something new for you guys. If you see a bunch of people walking and standing together, you're not gonna hesitate to call them a group. The important thing to remember is that proximity can override similarity. So if you take a bunch of different colored blocks in different shapes and put them close together, even if you have the same shapes and colors somewhere else, you'll be more prone to group the things close to each other as a group, rather than what shapes and colors they are. In terms of a narrative, you can use this to show where people are emotionally compared to one another. If two people are far apart, you show they are not a group, they are not together. This can show emotional distance, showing the people aren't of the same mindset. You can also show a group and someone is standing outside of that group, showing how they are an outsider, or that they don't fit in. Number 5. Figure/ground. Do you see a vase, or do you see two heads? Do you see the Toblerone mountain, or do you see a bear within it? Do you see FedEx as just a name, or do you see the arrow? Do you see the animals of the Bronx Zoo, or do you see the skyscraper of the city? This principle describes the eye's tendency to see and separate objects from their surrounding background. It works because the human eye wants to see the figure, the foreground object, and background, the ground, as two different planes of focus. Everything that is not figure is considered ground, which can be used to create some interesting visual effects and tricks, particularly when the designer or artist introduce deliberate ambiguity. If you've ever seen anything by the big dick dog MC Escher, you should be familiar with this. Again, this is one that's typically mostly spent when making a logo, but is also one you can use in case you wanna make something more symbolic or artsy-fartsy. And lastly we got number 6, Symmetry and Order. We as people are fixers. We like to fix things. Therefore, if there's a disorder or imbalance in your composition, the viewer will waste time trying to fix the problem rather than focusing on the message that is being conveyed. This is something I've covered in the webcomic relief before, where the sentence "if you make the reader unintentionally stop up, you fucked up" comes from. Say you have a page and all you got are frames stacked on the right side of the page and nothing on the left. There's just this empty pit there. It makes you uncomfortable. There's no symmetry, no order. It conveys a form of imbalance and chaos from what we're used to. Sure, you can use this, but know it creates a feeling of discomfort and you want to avoid this unless it's on purpose. These are the 6 Gestalt rules. You probably knew all these things already, but now you know them by the name, and know that they are straight up research that proves these things are a thing that exists and work. So it's not just up to feelings and thoughts. These are straight up proven composition techniques by specialists who've dedicated several years of their lives perfecting the art. So now you know Gestalt, a seemingly unimportant series of tools, but something that can really up your presentation, especially if you know how to use it. This has been Lemme School Year, here to help you create your creative work with a little more skill.